29. The Last Meal. Then the Gracious One, after living near Bhoganagara for as long as he liked, addressed Venerable Ānanda, saying, "Come, Ānanda, let us approach Pāvā." "Very well, Reverend Sir," Venerable Ānanda replied to the Gracious One. Then the Gracious One, together with a great community of monks, entered Pāvā. There the Gracious One lived near Pāvā, in Chunder the smith's mango wood. Chunder the smith heard, "The Gracious One, it seems, has arrived at Pāvā, and is dwelling near Pāvā in my mango wood." Then Chunder the smith approached the Gracious One, and after approaching and worshipping the Gracious One, he sat down on one side. While Chunder the smith was sitting on one side, the Gracious One instructed, roused, enthused, and cheered him with a talk about the teaching. Then Chunder the smith, having been instructed, roused, enthused, and cheered by the Gracious One with a talk about the teaching, said this to the Gracious One: "May the Gracious One consent, Reverend Sir, to me offering him a meal on the morrow, together with the community of monks." The Gracious One consented by maintaining silence. Then Chunder the smith, having understood the Gracious One's consent, after rising from his seat, worshipping and circumambulating the Gracious One, went away. Then after the night had passed, Chunder the smith, in his own residence, having had excellent foodstuffs made ready, and an abundance of tender pork, had the time announced to the Gracious One, saying, "It is time, Reverend Sir, the meal is ready." Then the Gracious One, having dressed in the morning time, after picking up his bowl and robe, together with the community of monks, approached Chunder the smith's residence, and after approaching, he sat down on the prepared seat. Having sat down, the Gracious One addressed Chunder the smith, saying, "Serve me with the tender pork you have prepared, Chunder, but serve the community of monks with the other foodstuffs which have been prepared." "Very well, Reverend Sir," said Chunder the smith, and after replying to the Gracious One, he served the Gracious One with the tender pork that had been prepared, but served the community of monks with the other foodstuffs which had been prepared. Then the Gracious One addressed Chunder the smith, saying, "Throw that left-over tender pork into a pit, Chunder, for I do not see, Chunder, in the world with its divinities, Mara and Brahma, in this generation with its ascetics and Brahmins, princes and men, one who, having eaten it, could completely digest it, except for a realized one." "Very well, Reverend Sir," said Chunder the smith, and after replying to the Gracious One, and throwing what was left over of that tender pork into a pit, he approached the Gracious One, and after approaching and worshipping the Gracious One, he sat down on one side. While sitting on one side, Chunder the smith, having been instructed, roused, enthused, and cheered by the Gracious One with a talk about the teaching, having risen from his seat, went away. Then for the Gracious One, after eating Chunder the smith's food, a painful affliction arose, bloody dysentery, and strong feelings occurred, such as end in death. There the Gracious One, mindfully, with full awareness, bore those pains without being troubled. Then the Gracious One addressed Venerable Ānanda, saying, "Come, Ānanda, let us approach Kusinara." "Very well, Reverend Sir," Venerable Ānanda replied to the Gracious One. "Having eaten Chunder the smith's food, so I have heard, the firm one experienced a very strong affliction, such as ends in death. For the teacher who had eaten tender pork, a very strong sickness arose. While still purging, the Gracious One said, 'I will go to the town of Kusinara.'